Okay, picture this. James Carter, he's 42, marketing exec in Atlanta. Late night, quiet apartment, just him and the dog snoring. He's scrolling LinkedIn, those big promotion dinners, just memories now. Mostly it's unanswered work emails pinging away.
Right.
And his doctor's worried, rising blood pressure. But it feels like something else underneath. It's been almost a year, he realizes, since anyone really, hugged him.
Wow. Yeah.
Then shift over to Houston. Amir Hassan, 28, software engineer. Modern apartment, but he's alone too. Scrolling wedding photos of friends, events he just couldn't face going to.
Avoidance, yeah.
Another hike planned, then abandoned. 80-hour weeks are his thing now. He's texting crisis lines at 2 a.m., his watch buzzing with irregular heartbeat warnings.
That's worrying.
And when his doctor just casually asked, "Who's your emergency contact, Amir?" Well, he just blanked. No one came to mind.
And see, what's really striking about James and Amir, their stories, they aren't just one-offs, are they?
No, not at all.
These kinds of quiet struggles, they're indicators of something much bigger happening. A kind of subtle but, significant unraveling of modern masculinity.
Right.
And it's hitting men across different ages, different backgrounds, different jobs, in ways we're really just starting to get our heads around.
And that's exactly what we want to dig into today in this deep dive. We're planning to unpack this whole complex thing from lots of angles. We'll get into the neurobiology, what's actually happening in the brain with loneliness, its history, how we even got here.
The digital side, too, which is huge.
Oh, yeah, the digital impact. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. The challenges of fatherhood today, which often go unsaid.
And how it hits harder for marginalized guys.
Definitely. That amplified isolation, plus loneliness creeping into the workplace, even busy ones.
But there are solutions emerging. We should talk about those.
For sure. Some really interesting global solutions, and hopefully some signs of new kinds of masculinity evolving.
Yeah, maybe a path forward.
And figure out what that path might actually look like, how we address this quiet crisis.
So our goal here, for you listening, is to give you a pretty comprehensive look at male loneliness now, in the 21st century. But, keep it digestible.
Right. No drowning in data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've gone through a ton of sources, studies, stories, research, and pulled out what we think are the key takeaways. Some might actually surprise you. Want to connect the dots, offer some perspective without making your head spin. Okay, so where do we start? Maybe the brain. How loneliness physically impacts men.
Yeah, let's do that. There was this 2024 study in Nature, really caught my eye. It found that for men dealing with social isolation, the amygdala, that's the brain's sort of threat detector, handles big emotions.
The fear center.
It shows increased activity, but at the same time, connectivity in the prefrontal cortex, the part 4, self-controlled decision-making that goes down.
Okay, so more alarm bells ringing, less rational control.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Exactly. And this imbalance, it might actually explain some of those behavioral patterns we see, swinging between feeling kind of numb, emotionally flat, and then suddenly having these outbursts.
Like Amir, you mentioned his late-night gaming rage.
Precisely. That intense anger over a video game, them feeling guilty afterwards, it might not seem obviously linked to being lonely, but neurologically, there could absolutely be a connection there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it goes deeper than just general brain activity, right? There's hormones involved too.
Ah, vasopressin.
Exactly. Vasopressin. It's really key for male social bonding. Think about older societies, hunter-gatherers maybe.
Yeah.
Men did things together, synchronized activities.
Like building something or a group hunt, you mentioned.
Right, things that required cooperation. And those activities would trigger vasopressin release. It literally fostered that sense of connection, strengthened those social bonds biologically.
But today, fast forward, what replaces those group activities? Often it's just staring at a screen, alone.
And the research backs this up. It suggests that that swap from collective action to solitary screen time can actually lower vasopressin levels.
Wow. So our modern lives might be biochemically working against our own wiring for connection.
It kind of looks that way. It's like our brains are still set up for the tribe, but our lifestyles are often undermining that need.
Is there anything that shows we can, reverse that?
Yeah, actually. There was this Swedish research, really cool finding. They had men swap just 30 minutes of watching TV alone for playing team sports.
Oh, okay.
And their vasopressin levels went up. by 22% in just a few weeks.
22%, that's significant.
It really is. It just highlights how making intentional changes, choosing social interaction, can have a real measurable effect on brain chemistry.
So putting it all together, this isn't just about feeling lonely. Prolonged isolation physically changes the male brain.
Right. And it could potentially create this feedback loop.
Yeah.
Isolation makes it harder to regulate emotions, which might lead to more isolation.
It really makes you think about how different things must have been historically before this kind of modern isolation became so normal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pre-industrial masculinity, it was fundamentally collective. Think about, say, medieval guilds in Europe.
Okay.
Work wasn't just earning a wage, it was tied up with a sense of brotherhood. A blacksmith, for instance, wouldn't just teach his apprentice the craft. They often lived together, ate together. It created this really strong community.
Yeah, a far cry from clocking in and out.
Totally. Then the Industrial Revolution hits. And suddenly, men often become these individual units, cogs in a machine, almost.
Right. Interchangeable.
And even those communal spots that popped up in cities, like you mentioned London's penny universities, those pubs buzzing with debate and ideas, they gradually faded, replaced by more solitary things, like the silent commute on the train.
And that trend just kept going, didn't it?
It did. By the mid-20th century, you get the organization man ideal taking hold. Loyalty to the corporation, individual achievement. Often that came at the expense of deeper community ties.
Like Amir's grandfather, maybe. Secure job, pension, but maybe not a lot of close friends outside work.
Potentially, yeah. That dedication to one company didn't always translate into a rich social network outside the office walls.
It's fascinating when you compare that to cultures that managed to hold on to those communal bonds more strongly.
Like the Maasai, you mentioned their Unodo ceremony.
Yeah, transitioning warriors to elders through weeks of shared stories, rituals. Sounds incredibly powerful for connection.
It really is. And it stands in such stark contrast to, say, the modern idea of the man cave. Which, might be meant as a retreat, but can easily become just another space for isolation, not real connection.
Good point. Even in Japan, right? That traditional salaryman culture, the lifelong loyalty, that's weakening too.
Yeah, significantly. The gig economy, job insecurity, it's eroding those old company bonds, and that adds another layer of loneliness and instability for many men there.
So the takeaway here seems to be loneliness isn't just some random thing that happened, it's kind of a historical outcome.
Exactly. A consequence of shifts in society and the economy that have, in many ways, cut men off from older ways of finding meaning and belonging.
And then layered on top of all that history comes the digital age, our online lives, which promises connection, but
can absolutely deepen isolation. It's a real paradox.
How do the algorithms play into this? You mentioned that Stanford study.
Yeah, the 2025 Stanford study. It's pretty eye-opening. It showed that men searching for something as basic as how to make friends were often algorithmically nudged towards alt-right online forums. Pretty quickly, too.
Seriously, just from searching for friends.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder of how easily vulnerable, disconnected people can get pulled into extremist spaces online. The algorithm sees the search for belonging, and unfortunately, some groups exploiting that feeling pop up.
That's disturbing. And what about this rage cycle thing on platforms like YouTube?
Right. That's another worrying trend. It seems like the algorithm can sometimes detect loneliness or frustration, and then it starts feeding the user content that validates anger, maybe directs it at certain groups.
And that can escalate.
It can, leading towards more and more extreme, harmful material. Amir's TikTok feed example. Starting with coding videos, then suddenly getting hit with alpha male stuff.
Yeah, that felt very relevant.
Feels like a classic case of the algorithm latching on to an underlying need, maybe for validation, acceptance, and serving up content that preys on it.
But you said technology isn't all bad here. There are positive uses.
Oh, definitely. It's crucial to remember that. Technology is a tool. Look at South Korea's Healing Camp app.
What does that do?
It kind of gamifies vulnerability.
Right.
Men earn points for sharing insecurities, then connect in these virtual campfires. It's clever, finding a way around cultural barriers to opening up.
Interesting, like a digital support group.
Sort of. And in Nigeria, there's the Brotherhood chatbot. It uses AI trained on local Yoruba proverbs to help men navigate stigmas around emotions.
Using culture with technology.
Exactly. So it really raises a big question, doesn't it? How can we intentionally design tech to promote empathy, real connection, not just endless engagement?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And another huge piece of this puzzle, we can't ignore it, is fatherhood. the impact of fathers, generation to generation.
It's massive. Amir's experience, with his father's stoicism, that silence rooted in cultural ideas of masculinity, sadly, that's very common.
And the stats back that up.
They do. Research consistently shows a strong link. Sons who describe their fathers as emotionally distant are 3 times more likely to struggle with self-isolation themselves later on.
3 times, wow.
Yeah. That lack of emotional connection, that modeling early on, it can set a pattern that's really hard to break.
But there are efforts to change that cycle, right? You mentioned those Icelandic retreats.
Yeah, the Dads United Wilderness Retreats. Sounds amazing, actually. Fathers out in nature doing survival activities together and finding space to open up, share vulnerabilities.
It actually works.
Apparently so. That Reykjavik University study found a 40% jump in emotional openness among the dads who participated. That's a powerful sign that change is possible.
40% is huge. But individual retreats aren't enough, are they? We need bigger changes.
Exactly. It points to the need for systemic support. Look at parental leave policies. In the U.S., for example, lots of companies offer maternity leave.
Sure.
But dedicated mental health days specifically for fathers, much rarer. Only about 12% offer that, versus 72% offering maternal leave.
That sends a message, doesn't it?
It does, intentional or not, about whose emotional well-being gets prioritized. That's why things like the Ikumen movement in Japan are important.
What's that?
It's about promoting involved fatherhood. You have prominent figures like CEO Hiro Tanka openly talking about taking paternity leave, sharing childcare, balancing work, normalizing it.
Making it okay for dads to be present emotionally and physically.
Exactly. This silent crisis in fatherhood, it needs tackling not just one dad at a time, but through policy and shifting those cultural norms.
And we absolutely have to remember, this experience of loneliness, it's not the same for everyone. If you're from a marginalized community, it gets even tougher.
Absolutely. The challenges get amplified, layered. Think about Carlos, the Mexican-American construction worker example.
Right. Migrant labor camps.
Yeah.
Already isolating.
Exactly. And then layered on top, you have cultural pressures around machismo, making it harder to admit you're struggling or ask for help.
And for indigenous men, like Jay Begay.
There you have the immense weight of historical trauma, the erosion of traditional community structures, contributing to devastatingly high suicide rates.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And then for disabled men, like Tom Hughes, the British veteran, there's this phenomenon called inspiration porn.
What's that exactly?
It's when disabled people are overly praised for just doing everyday things, almost treated like heroes for the benefit of non-disabled people feeling good.
Oh, I see.
And it can totally mask a deep sense of loneliness, a lack of genuine connection based on who they are as a whole person, not just their disability.
So these identities, race, class, disability, they intersect and make the isolation worse.
Precisely. That intersectionality is key to understanding it.
Which means the solutions have to be specific too, right? Tailored.
Absolutely. And we're seeing some really creative approaches, like Brazil's Home and Sim program, training barbers in favelas.
Barbers.
Yeah, training them as mental health first responders.
Yeah.
They're already trusted figures in the community.
That's smart, using existing networks.
Or Australia's Black Boys program, reconnecting Aboriginal youth with culture, providing positive male role models. And Canada's Love by Design workshops, using tech to help disabled men build confidence in dating and relationships.
Those are great examples. It shows you need that nuance.
You do. Effective solutions need that deep understanding of the specific challenges, culturally sensitive, community-based approaches.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The workplace. We think of it as social, right? But it can be lonely too.
Paradoxically, yes. Very much so. That 2025 Gallup poll was striking 68% of remote male workers feeling emotionally ghosted.
68%. That's huge, feeling disconnected even when you're logged in all day.
Exactly. And it's not just remote work. Think about high-pressure fields like finance.
Yeah, lots of teamwork, deals.
Outwardly, yes. Displays of camaraderie. But that intense competition, the focus on performance above all else, can breed profound isolation underneath.
Even with team drinks and stuff.
Sometimes, yeah. That reported failure of vulnerability training at Goldman Sachs kind of shows that superficial fixes don't work if the underlying culture doesn't change. You can't just mandate vulnerability.
So what does work in the workplace?
Well, it seems to require more intentional effort, like Siemens setting aside mandatory connection hours, time where work stops and teams do something else together, like cooking classes.
Actually building relationships, not just talking about work.
Right, or New Zealand's Mindful Worksites program. They saw a real impact on reducing suicide rates among male construction workers by setting up on-site peer support networks.
Peers helping peers.
Exactly. Making genuine human connection an integral part of the workplace culture, not just an afterthought or an HR initiative.
It's really inspiring, actually, to see countries looking at this not just individually, but systemically. Some of those global solutions are fascinating.
They really are. Bhutan is amazing.
Yeah.
Using their gross national happiness metrics.
Right, GNH, not GNP.
To actually fund local men's circles. These village tshokpas. Places where men can just talk openly. Farming issues, personal struggles, whatever. In a supportive group.
That's incredible. Prioritizing well-being right in the national budget.
It's a really holistic approach.
Yeah.
Then you have Portugal's Café de Homens. That started after the financial crisis.
Okay.
Just informal, non-judgmental spaces for men to connect, find solidarity, share experiences, community-led, grassroots stuff.
Simple, but powerful.
And even in Colombia, post-conflict, the Hombres de Paz program. Former enemies, ex-combatants working together on farming projects.
Building trust through shared work.
Yeah. Showing how connection can be a tool for healing, even reconciliation on a big scale. All these models, they just hammer home the importance of systemic support for connection for human dignity.
And amidst all these challenges, it does feel like maybe, just maybe, younger generations are starting to think differently about masculinity. Is there a shift happening?
It really seems like it. This idea of a new masculinity emerging, it's genuinely hopeful. That story about Mateo Nguyen's podcast in Brooklyn.
Yeah, teenage boys talking feelings, crying over K-dramas.
It's a world away from older stereotypes, isn't it? And that stat, 64% of Gen Z seeing gender traits as fluid, that suggests a real fundamental rethink of those rigid old norms.
More flexibility, less pressure to fit a mold.
Exactly. And look at things like the Junto app, actively setting up platonic vulnerability dates for men, creating totally new ways for guys to connect emotionally authentically.
That's really cool. So grassroots changes, or are they leading to policy changes too?
Starting to, yeah. Like California passing the Healthy Masculinity Act recently, or Sweden's, slightly unusual empathy raves.
Empathy raves.
Yeah, events designed to foster emotional connection and empathy through music and shared experience. It shows these cultural shifts are starting to bubble up into more formal structures.
So it feels like there's some positive momentum building.
I think so.
Yeah.
You mentioned Amir earlier, taking that step to go to a men's storytelling night. That's a big personal move.
Yeah, huge for him.
Yeah.
And his daughter's first word being Abba. That's just lovely, isn't it? A hopeful image.
It really is. And even looking at potential laws, like Norway, considering a right to connect law.
A right to connect. What would that mean?
Potentially requiring employers to actually fund social activities, things that build connection among employees. It signals society starting to recognize how vital social connection really is for well-being.
It all seems to come back to acknowledging the human cost, doesn't it? Like those final examples we found. That poem by the 14-year-old Minjan about his father's silence.
My father's silence was a language I mistook for stone.
So powerful. And then the image of Spain's president, a former firefighter, weeping publicly about his colleagues lost to suicide.
Yeah, these moments, intensely personal but also very public, they just force us to confront the reality. The cost of male loneliness, the pressures that lead to that repression.
So I guess the question we're left with, the thought maybe to leave you, the listener, with is, will our society finally start seeing men's vulnerability, not as some kind of weakness we need to hide, but just as a fundamental part of being human, a valuable part?
Yeah.
And if we actually do that, if we acknowledge and support men's emotional struggles, what kind of world could that open up? Maybe a richer one, a more connected one.